The 1950s may have been the golden age of cars, but not all models were built to impress. Some were so poorly made, unreliable, or downright bizarre that they became the only option for those on a tight budget. These cars were cheap for a reason. Constant breakdowns, questionable designs, and subpar performance made them a nightmare to own. Here are the on 13 ultra-crappy cars from the 1950s that only the less fortunate dared to drive. You won't believe how bad some of these budget options really were. The Allard P2 Safari, produced in the UK between 1952 and 1955, is a vehicle that, while ahead of its time conceptually, failed to deliver on multiple fronts. Marketed as a luxurious high-performance station wagon, a concept that might today be called a crossover, the Safari combined a rugged aesthetic with a powerful Ford V8 engine. However, despite its ambitious design and promise of versatility, the Safari struggled in the marketplace. Its outdated engineering, poor handling, and high price tag alienated buyers who opted for more practical and affordable vehicles. At its core, the Allard P2 Safari was built around a bold idea. It sought to merge the practicality of a station wagon with the thrill of a performance car. Powered by a Ford-derived flathead V8 engine, the Safari offered a level of power that was unusual for station wagons of the era. This engine made it capable of reaching speeds that would have impressed drivers in the early 1950s. On paper, it was a car that could tackle both the mundane tasks of family life and the open road with equal aplomb. Unfortunately, that promise was undermined by its outdated chassis and suspension. The Safari's underpinnings were based on pre-war designs, including a rudimentary ladder frame and a solid rear axle. While such engineering was standard a decade earlier, by the 1950s, buyers were beginning to expect more sophisticated handling and ride quality, especially in a vehicle marketed as both luxurious and sporty. The P2 Safari, however, felt clumsy on the road. Its body roll in corners and vague steering were far removed from the precision expected in performance-oriented cars. In addition to handling woes, the car suffered from significant design compromises. Despite its powerful engine, the Safari wasn't particularly adept off-road, nor did it have the interior refinement to truly compete with luxury saloons. The bodywork was heavy and utilitarian, and while this gave the car a unique, almost rugged appearance, it limited its appeal to buyers who wanted a more polished look. The rear load area, while functional, didn't provide enough cargo space to truly excel as a utility vehicle. It fell into a strange middle ground, neither as practical as a Land Rover, nor as refined as a Rover or Jaguar saloon. Then there was the price. The Allard P2 Safari was expensive, costing significantly more than comparable vehicles from Ford, Austin, or even Rover. The high price might have been justified if the car delivered groundbreaking innovation or unparalleled performance, but it didn't. Buyers couldn't help but notice that they could get a more modern, reliable, and comfortable vehicle for less money. Compounding the issue, Allard's limited production capabilities and niche brand recognition meant that it lacked the marketing power to draw customers away from more established automakers. Rust in build quality also plagued the Safari. British cars of the post-war era were often criticized for their susceptibility to corrosion, and the Safari was no exception. Owners reported issues with rust appearing relatively quickly, particularly around the body panels and frame. Combined with Allard's small dealer network and limited parts availability, maintaining a Safari was a challenge. A former owner I once spoke to described his experience with the Allard P2 Safari as both exciting and frustrating. "It had charm, no doubt about it," he said. "The V8 growl was fantastic, and it turned heads wherever I went. But the handling? Absolutely terrifying at speed. It felt like the front end had a mind of its own, and on rough roads, it was a wrestling match to keep it in line. And don't get me started on rust. I spent more time patching it up than driving it." The Safari's poor sales reflected these issues. With only a few hundred units produced, it quickly became apparent that the market wasn't ready or willing to embrace such an unconventional vehicle at the time. Buyers gravitated toward simpler, more practical station wagons or fully dedicated off-road vehicles. The Safari was discontinued after just a few years, and Allard would eventually fade into obscurity, remembered mostly for its high-performance sports cars like the J2. Today, the Allard P2 Safari is a rare and quirky footnote in automotive history. Its combination of station wagon practicality, V8 performance, and rugged styling makes it an interesting collector's item, but it remains a prime example of how good ideas can falter when execution and timing don't align. The Safari's concept of blending luxury, performance, and utility would eventually find a more receptive audience decades later with the rise of SUVs and crossovers. However, in the 1950s, the P2 Safari was simply too much of an oddball to succeed. The Dodge La Femme, produced in 1955 and 1956, stands as one of the most curious and misguided attempts at niche marketing in automotive history. Billed as a car designed exclusively for women, it came with a suite of feminine-themed accessories and a heavily gendered marketing campaign. While Dodge's intent may have been to appeal to the growing number of female drivers in the mid-20th century, the execution of this idea left much to be desired, ultimately alienating more buyers than it attracted. The La Femme was not only a commercial failure, but also a symbol of how stereotypes can derail a product's potential. The La Femme was essentially a dressed-up version of Dodge's Custom Royal Lancer. Mechanically, it was identical to other Dodge models of the time, with a robust V8 engine and the same body design. What set it apart was its pink and white color scheme, officially called Heather Rose and Sapphire White, and its interior styling, which featured custom fabrics adorned with rosebud and gold embroidery patterns. The car was marketed as a chic and practical vehicle for the modern woman, complete with accessories such as a matching pink purse, compact lipstick case, umbrella, and rain cape. These items were stored in compartments specially designed in the seatbacks, emphasizing its thoughtful design for female drivers. However, this overtly gendered approach was precisely where the La Femme stumbled. Instead of empowering women, the car's marketing reinforced the era's stereotypes. It painted a narrow picture of femininity, assuming that women drivers valued style and accessories over performance, practicality, or affordability. Many female buyers rejected this notion, finding it patronizing. Women didn't want a car that pandered to them with pink paint and built-in vanity kits. They wanted vehicles that met the same standards as those marketed to men. Beyond its tone-deaf concept, the La Femme suffered from practical issues as well. First, the added accessories and bespoke interior drove up its price, making it more expensive than comparable Dodge models without offering any tangible improvements in performance or utility. Second, while the pink and white color scheme was distinctive, it limited the car's appeal. Not every woman, or man for that matter, wanted to drive a vehicle that loudly announced its femininity. For many, the La Femme was seen as a novelty rather than a serious car. Critics of the time also noted that the La Femme was a product of lazy innovation. Instead of developing something genuinely new or useful for female drivers, Dodge simply took an existing model and added superficial changes. This approach made it clear that the company's primary motivation wasn't meeting the needs of women, but rather exploiting them as a marketing demographic. A former owner once reflected on their experience with the La Femme, saying, "I bought it secondhand, not because it was a women's car, but because it was in great condition. The purse and umbrella were long gone, and honestly, that was fine with me. It drove like any other car from the era, but the reactions were always the same. People laughed or rolled their eyes at the pink paint. I didn't care, but it was clear this car was more about looks than anything else." Despite Dodge's efforts to promote the La Femme, including special advertisements in women's magazines and displays at dealerships, it failed to resonate with buyers. Production numbers were low, with estimates suggesting fewer than 2,500 units were made over its two-year run. By 1957, Dodge quietly dropped the model from its lineup, leaving it as an experiment that had gone terribly wrong. The La Femme's failure offers an important lesson in marketing. While targeting specific demographics can be effective, doing so in a way that feels condescending or reductive often backfires. The car industry would take decades to move past such blatant stereotyping, and even today, automakers tread carefully when designing vehicles for specific groups. Today, the Dodge La Femme is a rare and quirky collector's item, valued more for its historical curiosity than for its automotive merits. It's a reminder of a time when automakers tried to sell cars not through innovation or quality, but through a misguided interpretation of gender roles. For better or worse, the La Femme remains a pink and white footnote in the history of American cars. The Ford Consul Mark I, introduced in the UK in 1951 and produced until 1956, marked a significant step forward for Ford's British lineup in terms of design and engineering. As part of Ford's new Three Graces lineup, alongside the Zephyr and Zodiac, the Consul was intended to bring modern styling, affordable pricing, and family-friendly functionality to post-war Britain. With its monocoque construction, hydraulic brakes, and relatively sleek lines, it was a leap ahead of Ford's pre-war designs. However, despite its innovations, the Consul Mk1 was plagued by numerous flaws that ultimately marred its reputation, leaving it overshadowed by more competent competitors. At first glance, the Consul seemed promising. Its fresh, American-inspired styling was a breath of fresh air in a market dominated by outdated designs. The car was also notable for its monocoque, unibody construction, which reduced weight and improved rigidity compared to the body-on-frame designs common at the time. Inside, the Consul offered a spacious cabin with simple but functional controls, appealing to families looking for an affordable modern car. It was also one of the first British Fords to feature a proper heater as standard equipment, an appreciated touch in chilly Britain. Unfortunately, what the Consul offered in innovation, it sorely lacked in execution. One of its biggest weaknesses was its engine. The 1.5-liter inline-4, producing a mere 47 horsepower, struggled to move the car with any sense of urgency. While the engine's modest power output was somewhat forgivable for an economy car of its era, the Consul's performance was sluggish even by 1950s standards. Acceleration was glacial, and the car's top speed of around 70 miles per hour meant it felt underpowered on the open road, especially compared to rivals like the Morris Oxford or the Austin A40, which offered more spirited performance at a similar price point. Reliability was another Achilles heel for the Consul Mk1. The engine and gearbox were prone to wear and breakdowns, often leaving owners stranded or with hefty repair bills. Reports of overheating, oil leaks, and persistent misfires were common among early adopters, and while Ford made incremental improvements over the years, these issues left a lasting stain on the car's reputation. Rust was perhaps the most notorious issue plaguing the Consul. British cars of the 1950s were generally vulnerable to corrosion, but the Consul seemed particularly prone to it. Owners often found rust forming on the wheel arches, sills, and floor pans within just a few years of ownership. Combined with the car's monocoque construction, this rust could severely compromise structural integrity, making repairs both difficult and costly. In damp, salt-laden British winters, the Consul quickly earned a reputation for dissolving into a rusty heap long before its mechanical components gave out. Competitors further highlighted the Consul's shortcomings. The Morris Oxford, while less stylish, offered better reliability and more robust engineering, while the Vauxhall Wyvern provided a smoother driving experience and comparable fuel efficiency. Even second-hand vehicles from other manufacturers often proved more enticing than a brand-new Consul, which struggled to justify its cost when weighed against its frequent maintenance needs and short lifespan. One former owner of a Consul Mk1 recalled their experiences with a mixture of fondness and frustration. "It was my first car, and I was proud of it at the time. The styling was lovely, very modern for the 1950s, but it was always breaking down. The gearbox gave me constant grief, and you could practically watch the rust spreading on the wheel arches. I spent more time underneath it with a spanner than driving it. I swear." Still, it had its moments. When it was running, it felt like the future compared to the old cars my parents drove. Despite its flaws, the Consul wasn't entirely without merit. It set the stage for Ford's later successes with the Zephyr and Zodiac, and its innovative features, like the monocoque construction, would become industry standards in the years to come. The Consul also helped to popularize the idea of affordable, family-oriented sedans in the UK, paving the way for models like the Cortina and Escort, which would go on to dominate the market in later decades. Today, the Ford Consul Mark I is a rare sight on the road, with surviving examples typically reserved for classic car shows and enthusiast collections. Its rust-prone nature and mechanical woes have made well-preserved examples increasingly scarce. But for some collectors, the Consul's blend of 1950s charm and historical significance makes it worth the trouble. As a piece of post-war British automotive history, it's remembered not just for its shortcomings, but also for its ambition to bring modern motoring to the masses, even if it sometimes fell short of that lofty goal. The Plymouth Plaza Suburban, produced from 1954 to 1958, was Plymouth's attempt to capture the growing family station wagon market in post-war America. This was a time when the family car was taking on a new identity, with station wagons becoming a staple for suburban households. While Plymouth had some success with their lineup overall, the Plaza Suburban failed to stand out. Its combination of poor build quality, uninspiring design, and outdated technology made it a tough sell compared to its rivals from Chevrolet and Ford, which offered more appealing alternatives. The Plaza Suburban was positioned as an entry-level station wagon within Plymouth's lineup. Its primary appeal was affordability, aimed at budget-conscious families looking for basic transportation. It came with a no-frills approach, minimal chrome trim, a simple interior, and a bare-bones list of features. Under the hood, it was powered by Plymouth's aging flathead six-cylinder engine, which, by the mid-1950s, was struggling to keep up with the more advanced and powerful engines offered by competitors. One of the major drawbacks of the Plaza Suburban was its engine's lack of power and refinement. The Flathead 6, while reliable in a basic sense, was underwhelming, producing modest horsepower that left the car feeling sluggish, especially when fully loaded with passengers and cargo. For families looking to tow a small trailer or take a road trip, the Plaza Suburban lagged behind rivals like the Chevrolet 210 Handyman or the Ford Ranch Wagon, both of which had more robust V8 engine options. Build quality was another significant issue. Plymouth's focus on keeping costs low often translated to cheaper materials and less attention to detail during assembly. Owners frequently complained about rattling body panels, inconsistent fit and finish, and interiors that wore out quickly. The upholstery, dashboard, and even door handles were prone to wear and tear, making the car feel old before its time. While durability wasn't uncommon for lower-tier models of the era, Plymouth's Plaza Suburban seemed to suffer more than most, earning it a reputation as a disposable car rather than a lasting investment. Design-wise, the Plaza Suburban was also underwhelming. Its styling was boxy and uninspired, lacking the flair and elegance of some of its competitors. This was a period when car makers were leaning heavily into tail fins, chrome, and dramatic design elements. And while Plymouth did incorporate some of these trends, the Plaza Suburban's utilitarian look made it a less exciting choice. Families who wanted a station wagon that didn't feel like a compromise were more likely to choose Chevrolet's offerings, which combined practicality with a touch of panache. To make matters worse, the technology and features offered by the Plaza Suburban were dated even when the car was new. By the mid-1950s, automatic transmissions, power steering, and power brakes were becoming increasingly common, especially in family vehicles. However, these options were either unavailable or prohibitively expensive on the Plaza Suburban, putting it at a disadvantage in an era when convenience and comfort were high priorities for buyers. Rust was another Achilles heel for the Plaza Suburban. Like many cars of the era, it was particularly susceptible to corrosion, especially in the northern United States, where road salt was commonly used in winter. Wheel arches, door sills, and floor pans were all prone to rusting out within just a few years, significantly shortening the car's lifespan and further damaging its reputation. A former owner once recounted their time with a Plaza Suburban. "We bought it because it was cheap. And with 4 kids to cart around, we didn't have a lot of choices. It got us where we needed to go. But it wasn't fun. The engine struggled on the highway. The interior fell apart after a few years, and the thing rusted like it had a grudge against the road. My neighbor's Chevy wagon was still running strong when we sent ours to the scrapyard. By the end of its production run in 1958, the Plaza Suburban was thoroughly outclassed by its competitors. Ford and Chevrolet had firmly established themselves as leaders in the station wagon market, offering models that were better built, more stylish, and more capable. Plymouth's attempt to attract budget-conscious buyers by cutting corners had backfired, and the Plaza Suburban became an afterthought in the rapidly evolving automotive landscape. Today, The Plymouth Plaza Suburban is a rarity, not because of its desirability, but due to its limited lifespan. Few examples have survived the decades, as rust and wear took their toll on most of these cars long ago. For collectors, it's a curiosity rather than a coveted classic, serving as a reminder of how even the best intentions can fall flat when execution and innovation are lacking. Simca Vedette S1 Sai. Yao Sana year 1954 to 1961 was a French attempt to bring American-inspired luxury to the European market. Positioned as a mid-range sedan with a bold, luxurious exterior and powered by a V8 engine, it was meant to appeal to consumers looking for a car with the power and style of the American market, yet within a French framework. However, despite its stylish appearance and ambitious design, the Vedette was plagued with numerous problems that ultimately led to its commercial failure. It became a textbook example of how a vehicle can fall short when attempting to mimic the appeal of a different car culture without the technical foundation to support it. Overview. The Vedette was created during a time when European consumers were beginning to dream of the larger, more luxurious American cars that had flooded the post-war market. In a bid to capture this trend, Simca designed the Vedette with styling inspired by the grand sedans of Detroit, featuring a long, elegant body adorned with chrome, a wide grille, and expansive curves that gave it an air of sophistication and power. Underneath the glitzy exterior, however, the car's performance did not measure up to its appearance. While the car was marketed as offering American-style comfort and power, it fell far short in terms of performance and mechanical reliability, leaving many buyers disappointed. The Vedette was powered by a 2.4-liter V8 engine, a key feature that was intended to give it the kind of power and smooth driving experience associated with American luxury sedans. The car's V8 engine was a bold choice for the time, but in practice it was woefully underpowered for a car of its size. At just 90 horsepower, the engine was sluggish and struggled to provide the performance one might expect from a larger vehicle. Despite being a V8, the car's acceleration was lackluster and it lacked the raw power and smoothness of its American counterparts. Even by European standards, where smaller engines were the norm, the Vedette's engine felt insufficient and left the car lagging behind on highways and steep inclines. The car's mechanical problems did not end with the engine. Reliability issues were rampant across the Vedette's components, with frequent breakdowns related to the transmission, suspension, and electrical systems. Many owners reported problems with starting the car, issues with the carburetor, and constant repairs to the clutch and transmission. While the car may have initially impressed with its appearance and the promise of an American-inspired driving experience, owners soon found themselves spending more time at the repair shop than on the road. This reputation for mechanical unreliability did significant damage to the Vedette's appeal, especially when compared to competitors like Peugeot and Citroën, which were known for their durable and dependable models. Handling was another critical flaw for the Vedette. Designed with the notion of offering a comfortable, smooth ride like that of an American sedan, the Vedette's suspension was ill-suited for European roads, which were often narrower and more winding than the open highways of America. The car's large size, combined with a less-than-ideal suspension system, made the Vedette difficult to maneuver, especially in urban settings or on winding country roads. While American cars of the era were designed to glide over long stretches of highway, the Vedette felt cumbersome and unwieldy, especially in tight corners. The combination of poor handling, sluggish acceleration, and unreliable mechanical components made the Vedette a frustrating car to drive, and it quickly earned a reputation for being more of a burden than a luxury vehicle. Despite its clear mechanical shortcomings, the Vedette's exterior styling was its strongest point. The sleek lines and chrome detailing gave it a distinct, if somewhat dated look that was aimed squarely at consumers who wanted a car with the visual appeal of an American sedan. However, this was also where the Vedette fell into the trap of imitation. While the design was undoubtedly attractive, it did not carry the same quality and craftsmanship as its American counterparts. The bold grille and expansive chrome elements may have looked the part, but the underlying materials and construction did not match up to the standards set by the American manufacturers that Simca sought to emulate. Another issue with the Vedette was its relatively high price point. Although it was positioned as a mid-range luxury sedan, the Vedette's performance and reliability issues made it a poor value for money. Buyers could opt for a similar price from more reputable brands such as Peugeot or Citroën, which offered cars that were not only more reliable, but also more suited to European driving conditions. The Vedette's high price, coupled with its weak engine and consistent mechanical failures, made it a tough sell. The Graham-Paige Hollywood 1949 to 1951 was the final vehicle produced by the Graham-Paige Company, marking the end of a once prominent brand in American automotive history. The Hollywood was introduced in the immediate aftermath of World War II, a time when the automotive industry was undergoing a significant transformation. While many car manufacturers were looking ahead, adopting new technologies, and designing more modern vehicles, the Hollywood was a product of the past, built on outdated design principles that made it largely obsolete even before it left the production line. Graham-Paige, a company that had found success in the pre-war years with cars known for their distinctive designs and engineering, had fallen behind by the late 1940s. The company failed to invest in the kind of innovation that was sweeping through the automotive world in the post-war period. When the Hollywood was unveiled, it was essentially a rehash of pre-war models, using a chassis and many design elements that had been developed years earlier. In a rapidly advancing industry, this choice proved to be a fatal mistake. While it was meant to revive the company and recapture its former glory, the Hollywood couldn't stand up to the competition from larger, more modern manufacturers. The Hollywood's appearance was probably its most notable feature. The car had sweeping, elegant lines, bold chrome detailing, and a stylish look that was characteristic of the late 1940s. At first glance, it might have seemed to fit into the era of post-war optimism, offering a sense of luxury and refinement. However, beneath its shiny exterior, the Hollywood was already showing its age. The body design, while attractive, was too conservative compared to the new models coming from other American manufacturers, who were embracing more streamlined, modern shapes that emphasized aerodynamics and innovation. But it wasn't just the design that made the Hollywood fall short. It was the outdated technology and mechanical components that made it nearly uncompetitive. The car was powered by an old, underperforming inline-six engine, which lacked the power and smoothness of more modern engines from competitors like Chevrolet, Ford, and Chrysler. The Hollywood's engine struggled to provide the performance expected of a mid-range luxury vehicle, making it feel sluggish and underwhelming, especially compared to the faster, more powerful cars that were beginning to dominate the market. The car's handling was also problematic. Built on a chassis that had not evolved with the times, it lacked the smooth, responsive handling that post-war consumers had come to expect. It was an awkward, uncomfortable drive that didn't offer the refined experience promised by its stylish exterior. In terms of comfort and features, the Hollywood also came up short. Despite its luxury car aspirations, the interior was basic, with cheap upholstery and a dated dashboard design that didn't stand up to the more modern and comfortable interiors found in rival vehicles. The car's seats were uninspired, the materials felt flimsy, and the overall feel of the cabin was far from the opulence that many other manufacturers were offering in the same price range. There were no standout features that would make the Hollywood feel like a truly premium vehicle. In comparison, other automakers were introducing cutting-edge features such as power windows, improved suspension systems, and more luxurious interiors, elements that the Hollywood sorely lacked. The lack of innovation combined with mechanical problems and poor handling made the Hollywood an unattractive option for buyers in the post-war market. The car's outdated design and underwhelming performance left it at a disadvantage against more competitive options. By the time the Hollywood was released, other automakers had already embraced newer designs and technologies, which made the Hollywood feel more like a relic from an earlier time. The fact that it relied on older chassis and engine designs made it an easy target for critics who saw it as a failure to keep up with the industry's rapid progress. The price of the Hollywood also worked against it. Although it was marketed as a luxury vehicle, its performance and features didn't justify the cost. Buyers were often reluctant to spend money on a car that felt old-fashioned and lacked the refinement of competitors like Chrysler's New Yorker or Chevrolet's Bel Air. Consumers, especially those looking for modern, reliable cars, turned to these other manufacturers that offered better value for money in terms of both performance and luxury. As the Hollywood failed to gain traction in the market, it became clear that Graham-Paige was no longer in a position to compete. The company had failed to update its production methods, failed to innovate in key areas, and ultimately could not keep pace with the larger automakers who were reaping the rewards of their investment in modern designs.
The Austin A90 Atlantic, 1949 to 1952, was a British luxury coupe that was produced with the ambition of capturing the attention of the American market in the post-war years. Designed as a stylish, elegant car with the promise of European refinement, the A90 Atlantic boasted sleek, curved lines and an upscale interior that was meant to attract American consumers looking for something sophisticated. The car's design featured chrome detailing, a prominent grille, and a graceful, flowing body shape, an aesthetic that aligned with the post-war desire for luxury and modernity. But despite its handsome looks, the A90 Atlantic faced significant challenges in terms of performance, practicality, and consumer appeal, particularly in the U.S., where it failed to compete with more powerful, homegrown alternatives. The biggest shortcoming of the A90 Atlantic was its underpowered engine. Despite being equipped with a 2.6-liter straight-six, the car struggled to deliver the kind of performance expected from a luxury vehicle. For American consumers who were accustomed to the power and smooth acceleration of V8 engines found in domestic vehicles like Ford, Chevrolet, and Chrysler, the Austin's engine was simply not up to par. The car was sluggish on the road, particularly when compared to the more powerful American cars that were gaining popularity in the post-war era. American luxury cars were rapidly becoming symbols of both status and performance, offering impressive engine power, smooth rides, and a level of comfort that the A90 couldn't match. In addition to its underwhelming engine, the A90 Atlantic suffered from the problem of being too heavy for its size. While the car offered a spacious and well-appointed interior, the heavy construction of the vehicle added to its sluggishness. The weight of the car affected its acceleration, handling, and overall driving experience. While luxury cars are expected to offer comfort and refinement, the A90's weight made it less nimble and responsive compared to the lighter, more agile cars being produced in the United States. At the time, American car manufacturers had begun to embrace design principles that favored lighter, more efficient constructions, leading to smoother driving experiences, better fuel economy, and more responsive handling. In comparison, the A90 Atlantic felt cumbersome and unwieldy, which turned off potential buyers who were looking for a car that could provide not only luxury, but also an enjoyable driving experience. While the Austin A90 Atlantic was clearly built with an eye on the luxury market, it was not equipped with the features and innovations that American consumers had come to expect from their vehicles. By the late 1940s and early 1950s, American automakers were introducing new technologies like power steering, automatic transmissions, and more refined suspension systems. Features that made their cars easier to drive, more comfortable, and more enjoyable to own. The A90, on the other hand, stuck with more traditional systems that did not provide the same level of convenience or sophistication. While the interior of the A90 was certainly luxurious by European standards, it lacked the opulence and high-tech features that American buyers were becoming accustomed to in their luxury vehicles. Another issue the A90 Atlantic faced in the U.S. market was the simple fact that American buyers were loyal to domestic brands. By the early 1950s, American automakers like Ford, Chevrolet, and Chrysler had firmly established themselves as the dominant players in the automotive industry, and their cars were deeply ingrained in the American cultural landscape. Many consumers preferred to buy American-made vehicles because of the familiarity and reliability they offered. The notion of purchasing a foreign luxury vehicle from a company that wasn't well known in the U.S. was a hard sell for most buyers. In addition, The Austin A90 was not well equipped for the American market's expectations when it came to after-sales support, parts availability, or service. American automakers had established extensive networks of dealerships and service centers, making it easier for customers to maintain their cars, while the Austin A90 Atlantic had none of these advantages. The A90 Atlantic's inability to compete with American domestic models became apparent after only a few years of production. Despite its stylish looks and the promise of European craftsmanship, the car failed to win over enough buyers in the U.S. Its sluggish performance, outdated mechanical systems, and lack of significant features meant it couldn't match the growing demands for more powerful, innovative vehicles. The Austin A90 Atlantic was, in many ways, a product of its time, offering a European take on the luxury coupe, but it simply wasn't equipped to face the rapidly changing and competitive car market in America. The Cadillac Series 62. Sedanette, 1948 to 1953, is often remembered as an iconic representation of American luxury cars in the post-World War II era. It was a two-door coupe designed with style and elegance in mind, capturing the essence of a booming economy and a culture that prized high-end craftsmanship and lavish cars. Cadillac, known for its premium status, launched the Series 62 Sedanette to cater to buyers seeking a combination of luxury and performance. With its sleek design and signature Cadillac features, the Sedanette stood out for its beauty and design. However, the very qualities that made it stand out also led to its eventual decline in popularity, as it was burdened by practicality issues that made it less appealing to a broader audience. From a design perspective, the Cadillac Series 62 Sedanette was a masterpiece. Its long, flowing body lines, sweeping curves, and chrome accents defined an era of post-war elegance, and it was a car that drew the attention of anyone who saw it. The two-door coupe design was stylish, offering a more sporty alternative to the traditional sedan. Inside, the Sedanette was furnished with all the luxury features Cadillac was known for: plush upholstery, smooth leather, and quality materials throughout. The car exuded sophistication, making it a symbol of wealth and success for those fortunate enough to own one. It was a vehicle that conveyed the image of American opulence and status, a kind of rolling piece of art that embodied post-war ideals of grandeur. But despite its luxurious appearance, the Cadillac Series 62 Sedanette had serious flaws that ultimately hindered its commercial success. The first major issue with the Sedanette was its size. Cadillac's decision to build such a large vehicle in an era when Americans were becoming more interested in practical, efficient cars was problematic. The car's immense length made it difficult to maneuver, especially in urban settings where tight parking and crowded streets were becoming more common. The Sedanette's size contributed to its cumbersome handling, making it feel unwieldy on the road. This was a time when the automotive industry was beginning to embrace more compact designs that offered greater agility and responsiveness, and the Sedanette's bulky form started to feel out of place by the early 1950s. The car's enormous size also had another major downside: its fuel efficiency, or rather, the lack of it. The Series 62 Sedanette was powered by a large V8 engine that provided plenty of horsepower, but it was also a notorious gas guzzler. The post-war era saw rising fuel costs, and consumer attitudes were starting to shift toward vehicles that could deliver better fuel economy. The Sedanette, with its heavy body and powerful engine, was inefficient by the standards of the time. It consumed fuel at a rate that made it impractical for most people, particularly as the cost of gasoline began to climb and consumers started demanding more fuel-efficient options from automakers. In addition to its size and fuel inefficiency, the Cadillac Series 62 Sedanette lacked some of the innovations that were beginning to appear in American cars during the 1950s. By the time the Sedanette was in production, other manufacturers were introducing more advanced technologies such as power steering, improved suspension systems, and automatic transmission options that made driving easier and more enjoyable. While the Cadillac offered a smooth and comfortable ride, it wasn't equipped with the kind of modern features that were becoming standard in many competitors' cars. In this way, the Sedanette began to feel somewhat outdated as newer, more innovative vehicles were entering the market. The car's mechanical systems were also far from cutting edge. For example, its suspension system, while providing a comfortable ride, lacked the refinement and performance seen in many other luxury cars of the period. Furthermore, while Cadillac's reputation for luxury was well established, the Series 62 Sedanette was seen by some as an overpriced vehicle that didn't offer enough to justify its high cost. The car's extravagant design and powerful engine were certainly appealing, but the practical considerations, fuel economy, maneuverability, and overall performance, left many buyers wondering if the Cadillac was worth the price tag. Other American manufacturers, such as Ford and Chevrolet, were offering more practical and affordable vehicles that could deliver similar levels of luxury without the associated downsides. As a result, the Sedanette struggled to compete in a market that was shifting toward more efficient, versatile, and modern cars. Despite its beauty and prestige, the Cadillac Series 62 Sedanette was unable to meet the changing demands of American consumers. As the 1950s progressed, the car market was moving toward more compact. The Packard Clipper. 1953 to 1957 represents one of the most significant missteps in the history of the Packard brand, which had long been known for its luxury vehicles. Launched as an attempt to appeal to the mass market segment, the Clipper was intended to broaden the brand's appeal and increase sales during a time when competition in the automotive industry was intensifying. Unfortunately, the Clipper failed to achieve this goal and ended up contributing to the decline of Packard, once considered one of the most prestigious American automakers. Packard at the time was already a well-established name in luxury cars. Their vehicles were known for their high-end craftsmanship, powerful engines, and sophisticated features. However, as the 1950s progressed, Packard found itself struggling to compete with the increasing dominance of mass-market automakers like Ford and Chevrolet, which were producing cars that appealed to a much broader segment of the population. To combat this, Packard decided to introduce the Clipper, positioning it as a more affordable alternative within their lineup. While the decision to enter the mass market segment might have seemed reasonable on paper, the Packard Clipper was poorly positioned both in terms of price and product. For Packard's loyal customers, the Clipper wasn't luxurious enough. Packard had built its reputation on offering premium vehicles with superior features, elegant interiors, and refined engineering. The Clipper, however, was positioned as a more affordable vehicle, but failed to deliver the same level of luxury that the brand's more high-end models were known for. As a result, many of Packard's existing customers were alienated by the Clipper, feeling that it was a diluted version of what they expected from the brand. On the other hand, the Clipper also faced stiff competition from other mass-market automakers like Ford, Chevrolet, and Chrysler, which were producing cars that offered similar or better quality at a more competitive price. The Clipper's pricing was not sufficiently low enough to appeal to cost-conscious buyers, and it lacked the quality and luxury to justify its higher price when compared to other mid-range models from its competitors. This meant that, in the eyes of potential buyers, the Clipper did not stand out in any meaningful way. It was not as luxurious as a Cadillac or Lincoln, but it was also not affordable enough to compete with the likes of Ford or Chevrolet. It occupied a confusing space in the market that ultimately hurt its sales and the reputation of the Packard brand. Moreover, the Packard Clipper suffered from the general issues that plagued many of Packard's later models. Despite the brand's legacy of superior engineering, the Clipper was often criticized for its build quality, which was inconsistent. The materials used in the Clipper's construction were not up to the standard that customers had come to expect from Packard, and the fit and finish often fell short of expectations. This eroded the brand's image and made it even harder for the Clipper to compete with other manufacturers offering more reliable and well-built vehicles. Additionally, the Benz Clipper suffered from a lack of innovation compared to its competitors. The 1950s were a time of significant technological advancement in the automotive industry, and manufacturers were introducing new features and designs at a rapid pace. Packard, however, struggled to keep up with these innovations, and the Clipper felt somewhat outdated in terms of both design and technology. The competition, meanwhile, was introducing cars with better performance, more modern styling, and more advanced features. The Clipper was simply not cutting-edge enough to capture the attention of the mass market, and it failed to live up to the expectations of Packard's traditional customers. The introduction of the Clipper also coincided with Packard's ongoing financial struggles and the broader decline of the brand. In 1954, Packard merged with Studebaker. But this move was unable to reverse the company's downward trajectory. The Clipper, far from being a savior for the company, marked the beginning of Packard's final years as an independent manufacturer. By the time production of the Clipper ended in 1957, the company was already on its way out of the market. The Clipper, in many ways, symbolized Packard's failure to adapt to the rapidly changing automotive industry. In conclusion, the Packard Clipper was a car that failed to resonate with either Packard's traditional luxury customers or the mass-market buyers it aimed to attract. It was too expensive for the average consumer and lacked the luxury and refinement that had made Packard famous. Its poor reception in the market hastened the decline of the Packard brand, contributing to its eventual dissolution. The IFA F9, 1949 to 1956, was one of East Germany's early attempts to revive automobile production after World War II, built on the remnants of pre-war German engineering. Based on the DKW F9 prototype, a design conceived before the war but delayed due to the conflict, the IFA F9 inherited many of its predecessor's qualities. However, what could have been a promising step forward in the global automotive industry instead became a cautionary tale of how outdated technology, limited resources, and poor execution can doom a car's potential. The IFA F9 was powered by a small two-stroke, three-cylinder engine that produced only around 28 horsepower. While two-stroke engines were relatively simple and inexpensive to produce, they were already considered outdated in many markets by the late 1940s. The F9's engine was noisy, inefficient, and emitted significant amounts of smoke, a common drawback of two-stroke designs. Performance was lackluster, with sluggish acceleration and a top speed barely reaching 100 kilometers per hour, 62 miles per hour. These limitations made it unappealing to drivers who were beginning to expect more power and refinement from even budget cars. The design of the F9, while streamlined and modern-looking for its time, was heavily based on pre-war concepts, which meant it lacked the innovation seen in contemporary cars from Western Europe and the United States. The car's aerodynamics and styling were reminiscent of the DKW F9 prototype, but the technological stagnation imposed by post-war shortages in East Germany left it behind its competitors. Cars like the Volkswagen Beetle and the Citroën 2CV, which were also designed as affordable vehicles for the masses, offered far superior reliability, usability, and modern engineering. One of the IFA F9's biggest shortcomings was its build quality, which was severely hampered by the economic conditions of post-war East Germany. Materials were in short supply, and what was available was often of poor quality. The F9's body panels, interior fittings, and mechanical components suffered from this, leading to frequent breakdowns and premature wear. Rust was a persistent issue, exacerbated by the use of low-grade steel. This lack of durability quickly became a source of frustration for owners and further diminished the car's appeal. In its home market, the F9 struggled to win favor even among East German drivers, who had limited options in the state-controlled economy. While the car was relatively affordable by the standards of the time, its performance and reliability issues made it less desirable than it could have been. Additionally, because of the limited production capacity in East Germany, the F9 was never manufactured in sufficient numbers to make a significant impact. Exports to other countries were minimal, as Western markets had access to far superior vehicles, and the IFA F9 could not compete on either price or quality. The geopolitical context also played a role in the car's failure, as East Germany's automotive industry was largely isolated from Western advancements. The F9 remained technologically stagnant during its production run. Meanwhile, cars in Western Europe and North America were rapidly evolving, with innovations such as more efficient four-stroke engines, better suspension systems, and improved safety features becoming common. The F9, on the other hand, was a relic of a bygone era, a car that embodied the technological and economic struggles of its time rather than a bold step into the future. By the time production of the IFA F9 ended in 1956, it was clear that the car had failed to establish itself as a viable competitor even within its limited sphere. Its successor, the Tucker-Wartburg 311, attempted to address some of the shortcomings of the F9, but the legacy of outdated design and subpar quality lingered. The IFA F9, in hindsight, was more of a symbol of East Germany's post-war recovery efforts than a true contender in the automotive market. While it played a role in keeping the East German automotive industry alive during a challenging period, it ultimately showcased the limitations of that industry rather than its potential. In conclusion, the IFA F9 was a car that might have been adequate if it had debuted a decade earlier, but by the late 1940s and early 1950s, it was already obsolete. Its weak two-stroke engine, poor build quality, and outdated design ensured that it struggled to find success, even in the constrained market of East Germany. The F9 serves as a reminder of how technological stagnation and economic hardship can prevent an otherwise promising vehicle from achieving its goals, leaving it as little more than a footnote in automotive history.
The Studebaker Scotsman 1957 to 1958 was a bold but ultimately flawed attempt by Studebaker to capture the budget-conscious segment of the American car market during a time of economic uncertainty. Positioned as an ultra-affordable vehicle, the Scotsman was designed to strip away all non-essential features and focus solely on being an inexpensive means of transportation. While the concept had potential, the execution left much to be desired, and the Scotsman ended up alienating buyers more than attracting them. Born out of necessity, the Scotsman was a response to Studebaker's dire financial situation in the mid-1950s. Facing stiff competition from the big three automakers, Ford, GM, and Chrysler, Studebaker was losing ground rapidly. The company's leadership believed that a no-frills, low-cost car could carve out a niche in the market. At first glance, this seemed like a viable strategy, especially during a period when many Americans were tightening their belts. The Scotsman was built with cost-cutting as its central principle. Everything about the car was designed to reduce production expenses. It lacked chrome trim, instead using painted bumpers and minimal ornamentation. The interior was equally austere, with hard plastic and vinyl replacing softer, more luxurious materials. Even the dashboard was basic, featuring only the most essential gauges. Power windows, air conditioning, and even a radio were either unavailable or offered only as costly add-ons. In some cases, owners even had to pay extra for items as fundamental as a sun visor or armrests. While these measures did succeed in keeping the price low, the Scotsman was one of the cheapest cars on the market at the time. They also made the car feel depressingly Spartan. The Scotsman wasn't just stripped down, it looked and felt cheap. Buyers who might have been drawn to the low price were often put off by the car's bare-bones appearance and uncomfortable interior. Competing budget cars like the Chevrolet 150 or Ford Mainline managed to offer low-cost options without sacrificing basic aesthetics and comfort, making the Scotsman's stark design seem unnecessarily severe. Performance was another weak point for the Scotsman. It was powered by a modest inline-six engine, which, while adequate for basic transportation, offered underwhelming acceleration and limited top-end performance. Buyers seeking more power could opt for a V8 engine, but this added cost undermined the car's primary selling point: its affordability. Fuel economy, while reasonable, wasn't enough of a standout feature to compensate for the car's other shortcomings. Build quality also became a recurring issue. In their efforts to cut costs, Studebaker used inexpensive materials and simplified production processes, leading to reliability problems and frequent complaints about durability. The Scotsman's paint was prone to chipping, and its minimalistic construction made it noisier and less comfortable than many of its competitors. Owners often found themselves dealing with rattles, leaks, and other annoyances that compounded the car's already unappealing character. In addition to these practical shortcomings, the Scotsman suffered from a marketing problem. Studebaker's branding of the car as an ultra-budget option may have been honest, but it also created a stigma. Buyers felt that the Scotsman's austere design was almost a judgment on their financial status. Owning one marked you as someone who could only afford the bare minimum. This was in stark contrast to the American car culture of the 1950s, which celebrated style, luxury, and technological innovation. In an era of chrome fins and tailpipes, the Scotsman stood out for all the wrong reasons. The Scotsman's sales were modest but not disastrous, and it did manage to attract a small group of buyers who valued its practicality and low cost. Farmers, small business owners, and other practical-minded individuals appreciated the car's no-nonsense approach. However, this niche audience was not enough to sustain the model, nor did it contribute significantly to Studebaker's bottom line. The Scotsman's minimal profit margins meant that even reasonable sales figures didn't translate into meaningful financial recovery for the company. By 1958, the Scotsman was phased out in favor of the more feature-rich Studebaker Lark, which sought to compete in the burgeoning compact car market. The Lark was a much better received model, underscoring the Scotsman's failure to resonate with the broader market. In retrospect, the Studebaker Scotsman was an interesting experiment that attempted to address a genuine need for affordable transportation, but ultimately misjudged what buyers were willing to sacrifice. Its extreme cost-cutting measures made it unappealing to many, even within its intended demographic. The Scotsman stands as a reminder that affordability alone is rarely enough to guarantee success in the automotive world. The Peugeot 203, produced from 1948 to 1960, occupies an intriguing chapter in the history of French automotive design. Introduced as Peugeot's first post-World War II car, the 203 was envisioned as a family sedan that would help the company re-establish itself in a recovering economy. At its debut, the 203 showcased some forward-thinking features and initially found success, but as the years rolled on, its limitations became increasingly apparent, ultimately rendering it outdated and less competitive in a rapidly evolving market. At its launch, the Peugeot 203 was something of a technological marvel for its time, especially considering the constraints of post-war production. It featured a monocoque chassis, which was relatively advanced compared to the body-on-frame designs still common in the late 1940s. Its suspension system, independent at the front and a live axle at the rear, provided a comfortable ride for its class. The car also boasted an inline-four engine with a hemispherical combustion chamber, producing around 45 horsepower. This was respectable for a small family car of the era and contributed to the model's reputation for mechanical reliability. The 203's styling was simple yet elegant, with a rounded, streamlined design that was aerodynamic for the time. Its build quality and durability also earned praise, particularly in export markets where it competed against similarly sized vehicles like the Volkswagen Beetle and Morris Minor. Peugeot's engineering prowess gave the 203 a reputation for robustness, and it became a popular choice among families and even for long-distance rallies. However, the automotive world of the 1950s was one of rapid innovation, and this is where the 203 began to fall behind. By the mid-1950s, many competing manufacturers were introducing cars with larger engines, more spacious interiors, and modern conveniences. In contrast, the 203's engine remained modest in power, with its 1.3-liter displacement struggling to provide adequate performance for a car that was increasingly perceived as underpowered. Acceleration was sluggish, and the top speed of around 115 kilometers per hour, 71 miles per hour, felt insufficient as roads improved and driving expectations rose. Another drawback was the car's interior space, which was cramped even for a family sedan. The 203's compact dimensions meant that rear seat passengers often felt squeezed, and luggage space was limited. While these compromises were acceptable in the immediate post-war years, they became glaring disadvantages as more spacious and versatile models from other manufacturers hit the market. By the mid-1950s, buyers seeking a practical family car could find better options at a similar price point, such as the Citroën DS, which redefined the segment with its futuristic design and innovative features. The 203 also struggled in terms of modernization. Peugeot was conservative in updating the car during its production run, relying on its initial design far longer than competitors. While minor revisions were made, such as slightly increased engine power and updated trim, these changes were not enough to keep the car competitive. Buyers who had initially been drawn to the 203's reliability and solid construction began to look elsewhere for vehicles that offered more advanced technology and better performance. Moreover, the Peugeot 203's pricing became an issue. As production costs remained relatively high, the car's affordability compared to newer, more capable models was called into question. Peugeot's attempts to maintain profitability meant that the 203 was less of a bargain as the 1950s progressed. In markets where competition was fierce, particularly in Western Europe, this eroded its appeal even further. Despite its growing obsolescence, the 203 retained a loyal following among certain demographics, particularly in rural areas where its reliability and ease of maintenance were valued. The car's sturdy construction made it well suited to rough roads, and its simple mechanical components were relatively easy to repair. These qualities ensured that many 203s remained in service long after production ceased in 1960. In hindsight, the Peugeot 203's decline can be attributed to its failure to adapt to a rapidly changing automotive landscape. While it was a well-engineered and dependable car in its early years, it became a victim of its own success. Peugeot's reluctance to significantly update the model meant that it was eventually eclipsed by more modern and competitive offerings. The 203 serves as a reminder of the importance of innovation and evolution in the automotive industry. Even a strong start cannot guarantee long-term success if a model fails to keep pace with its rivals. Ultimately, the Peugeot 203 remains an interesting piece of automotive history. It symbolized Peugeot's recovery in the post-war years and demonstrated the company's engineering capabilities. The Zündapp 500 compressor, unveiled in 1950, was a fascinating yet ill-fated attempt by the German motorcycle manufacturer Zündapp to venture into the world of sports cars. Known primarily for its durable motorcycles and scooters, Zündapp aimed to diversify its portfolio and elevate its brand by creating a high-performance automobile. Unfortunately, this ambitious endeavor was plagued by challenges that ultimately sealed the compressor's fate as a forgotten footnote in automotive history. Zündapp entered the post-war automotive scene at a time when Germany was rebuilding its industrial base. The company envisioned the 500 compressor as a halo vehicle that would showcase its engineering prowess. The car was designed as a two-seater coupe with a sleek, aerodynamic body and a supercharged, hence compressor, 500cc engine. At a glance, the car seemed poised to deliver on the promise of combining speed, style, and cutting-edge technology. However, beneath its striking exterior lay a host of issues. One of the car's most glaring problems was its engine. The 500cc supercharged unit was highly ambitious for its time, but proved to be a mechanical nightmare. While theoretically capable of impressive performance, the engine suffered from reliability issues that plagued early prototypes. Overheating, oil leaks, and inconsistent power delivery were common complaints during testing. These issues were exacerbated by the complexities of the supercharger, which required meticulous maintenance and was prone to failure. For a sports car to succeed, especially in the performance-oriented segment, reliability is key, and the 500 compressor simply couldn't deliver. Another critical flaw was the car's production cost. Zündapp lacked experience in building automobiles, particularly high-performance ones, and this inexperience translated into inefficiencies on the factory floor. The car's advanced engineering and handcrafted construction made it prohibitively expensive to produce. As a result, Zündapp was unable to price the compressor competitively. Buyers seeking a sports car in the early 1950s had other, more affordable options, such as the MGTD or the Porsche 356, both of which offered similar levels of performance with fewer headaches. The compressor's practicality, or lack thereof, also hindered its appeal. Its small engine, while innovative, was outmatched by the larger, more powerful units in competing sports cars. Additionally, the interior was cramped, offering little comfort for drivers or passengers. Storage space was minimal, further limiting the car's usability. These shortcomings made the 500 compressor an unappealing option for buyers seeking a balance of style and functionality. Zündapp's lack of experience in marketing and distributing automobiles compounded the car's problems. While the company had a solid reputation in the motorcycle industry, it struggled to establish itself in the competitive automotive market. The compressor's high price and reliability concerns scared off potential buyers, and Zündapp failed to generate the buzz needed to make the car a success. Ultimately, production of the 500 compressor was short-lived, and only a handful of units were ever built. These cars were primarily used as prototypes and promotional models rather than being sold to the public. The project's failure marked the end of Zündapp's brief foray into the world of sports cars, and the company returned its focus to motorcycles and scooters, where it continued to find moderate success until its closure in the 1980s. In hindsight, the Zündapp 500 compressor was a classic example of a company overreaching its capabilities. While it showcased some bold ideas and a willingness to innovate, the project was ultimately undermined by technical difficulties, high production costs, and poor market positioning. Today, the few surviving examples of the compressor are regarded as rare collectibles, valued more for their novelty and historical significance than their performance or practicality. The Zündapp 500 compressor remains a cautionary tale in the annals of automotive history. It highlights the challenges of breaking into a new and highly competitive market, especially when ambition outpaces experience and resources. Although it faded into obscurity, the compressor is remembered as a bold, albeit flawed, experiment in the quest for automotive excellence.